My name's Gary Manley. I have a Dickin's medal which was presented to Antis, a dog that flew with the RAF in World War II and won it for bravery, and also dug people out of a bombed building and saved their lives. And I'm going to now tell you the story how I came about having the medal. One day my two young daughters bought me a book to read on the way to work going in, and it was called One Man and His Dog by Auntie Richardson. And I read the book and I was so overwhelmed with the book, right, that I couldn't forget the story. And the book was given to me in 1994, and in 1995 the Antis medal was being sold at Sotheby's. So I took time off and paid a new world record for the Dickin's medal, which is known as the Antis medal. And I paid 18,400, never known to be paid for any medal before at that time. And at that time I met the widow, Maureen Bozdech. Jan Bozdech by this time was dead. And I said to Maureen Bozdech, why wasn't the film ever made about Antis? And she said to me, her husband sold it to 20th Century Fox. So I was so overwhelmed I got my solicitors to get through to 20th Century Fox, and then I flew to America to see 20th Century Fox, his solicitors, and they said that's right, they do have the film and television rights to the story. And she could see that it meant a lot to me and getting the film rights. And then when me and my partner, who was alive at the time, required the film rights, I went down to see Maureen, and we spoke and had tea together, and she said yeah, it'd be ideal, and I said to her, why don't she come up and stay with me in East Sussex, and we can go to see the Born Free film, the Born Free Foundation, which she did, and she met Virginia McKenna and Will Travers, and everyone at the time was overwhelmed. I think it's one of the most famous World War II stories about a human being and a dog, like an animal that can be so close to us and go through the same trials, terrible events as what happened in World War II. And I hope one day someone will approach us and say, right, we will put the money up, we will make the film, and that's it.
How did you come to buy the medal? How did you find out that the medal was for sale?
I was driving my car back from work and I heard it on the wireless, BBC 2, saying the medal was coming up, and it was 3 days' time. So I took that time off, I went to the auction.
Where was the auction? It was in
the
London,
auction
or?
was in West Sussex, I believe, not in London, at Sotheby's in West Sussex. As I said, I paid a new world record for it, which I just got overwhelmed by the story.
And there were so many bidders from abroad?
There was bidders from abroad on telephones and everything. And when I'd realised, I thought to myself, what have I done? But I've never regretted paying that amount of money. I sometimes lend it to the Imperial War Museum to be on show when they have special occasions, and I'm happy to do so. I'm sure one day someone will come up and make the film.
Please give us resume of the important aspects of Antis's life that you would like to have brought out in the film?
Antis, as you know, he was found as a puppy. If Bozdech had left him behind, he would have surely died because he was only 5 weeks old.
He was in a ruined farmhouse, I think.
He was in a bombed out farmhouse on the Czech and French borders. So the bond between Jan Bozdech and the dog couldn't have been more closer. He learnt the dog to feed, he trained it well, and the Czech airmen actually thought the dog brought him luck.
Yes.
Because him and most of his crew that went through was some of the few that made it through World War II.
Yeah.
I think 60% of his friends were all killed.
Mm.
So the Czech Air Force we do owe a great debt to. And this would tell the same, that would tell the story about the Czech Air Force, which was linked to the RAF in them days. And remember, Britain was in such a terrible situation.
And how did he come to get the dog from France to England, where
they would only let, there were boats to take him to England, right? And when they found out he had this dog, they said no animals allowed. They said give it away to a Frenchman to keep it, and they wouldn't let him on the boat. So Jan Bozdech stayed ashore, and he made a plan with his friends to open a porthole. He would get a rowing boat, and they all lowered a basket out, and Jan Bozdech put the puppy in the basket, and they pulled it up through the pool, and they hid it in the laundry, which was quite remarkable. When Jan Bozdech was going aboard, the guy said to him, he said, I see you ain't got your dog with you, I hope you found a good home. He said, I certainly did. So the boat pulled out with Jan and the dog and the air crewman who halfway across they found out that they had a dog, and they said it would have to go in quarantine, it wouldn't be allowed on English soil, and he knew this was 6 months. So what they done, they smuggled it out in their kit bag and got it through. And when they were asked what happened to the dog, they said they didn't know. It must have fallen overboard.
And tell us a little bit about how Antis got to be flying, how he stayed at the airfield and waited for his owner to come back. When
the RAF took them on, they said they'd have to fly by their rules, and dogs wasn't allowed. So they says that the dog wouldn't be allowed on the aerodrome. But Jan had found a small hut just outside the airport, which he slept there with his dog. And they were so successful with the RAF that he finally got the commanding officer to say yes, the dog could stay at the airport as long as it was kept under strict control. So Jan said yes, he would. And one day the alarms went that they were on a bombing mission that night, and he left the dog, and the dog must have got through a window and sneaked onto the bombing plane, the
Wellington.
And when they were took off, they heard this whimper, and sure enough, it was Antis. He had sneaked on the plane, and he was on the bombing range, and he was very cold and short of oxygen, so he took his mask off to share it with his dog, Jan did. And when they got back, the commanding officer said, well, if it give you no trouble, he couldn't see any reason why it shouldn't fly with you as a mascot. And after so many bombing raids, the crew thought this dog was bringing them a luck, because, as I said, 60% of his other pilots got killed. And during the war, there was a bombing raid on Liverpool, and everyone had to go to help to dig people out the ruins. And he took his dog, and the dog was smelling certain areas, and it could smell people under the ruins. And it saved not only a baby that was found, but 5 or 6 other people in the ruins.
He could also hear when his owner's plane was coming back. Could he
oh yeah,
tell him?
He also knew the actual plane out of all the others that was coming back. He could tell the engine noise, and once it never came back, it was shot down and crash landed at another airport, and the dog would not go in. It just sat there waiting for his dog to come.
No, Jan was wounded, I think, and he was in hospital, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was in hospital.
So they brought him back by car to collect his dog.
That's right. And
he certainly could sense enemy aircraft approaching. He knew the sound of my husband's bomber, and on the occasion when I think it crash landed in some other airfield, my husband was taken to hospital for a week or so. The animal wouldn't eat or hardly slept, was keeping vigil for him.
And the dog was wounded.
Yeah, it shot his ear off, and it got a bit of shrapnel in the stomach. But at the time, the dog made no noise of pain or anything. It was quiet, and it wasn't till they landed they realised the dog was wounded. So, what a remarkable story this is. And my interest in it is, if a film was made, it would benefit Born Free Foundation to keep animals in the wild. To link this story of Antis, right, with the wilds and conservation would be marvellous.
Well, Antis managed to help his master to escape from Czechoslovakia.
Oh yeah,
after the communists
took over. After the war, Jan and Antis went back to Czechoslovakia. He was an hero. So was his friends who survived. They were all heroes. And then the communists took over Czechoslovakia, and because Jan said to himself, I've just fought a war to be free, and now we got the communists. And he was so outspoken, he was warned by a top official that his name was on a hit list to have him taken out and killed. So he had no choice but to escape from Czechoslovakia. So one night, him and his friend and a specialist who could get him out of the country by going over the mountains, I believe it was into France.
Into Germany it was.
Took him, right? And they had borders control, right? And once again, Antis is sensed that there was a border control walking his way, and this man with a gun faced him, and without telling the dog sprung at the border control and brought him down, and they jumped on him and gagged him and tied him up. His friend said, let's kill him, and his friend said, you don't want to sink. Jan said, you do not want to sink as low as they are. Just tie him up and let him go. We can get across the border. We're nearly there. And then they crossed the border, and Jan came back to England with his dog.
And how was his life in England when he returned to England? What did he do?
He was quite happy. He
was in the RAF, was he?
He was still with the RAF, yeah.
And with Antis, he took
Antis, yeah. And
what happened to Antis finally?
Finally, he got old and died, and he was buried at a cemetery in
Ilford.
In Hilford, is
Ilford,
it?
I think.
Yeah. And to this day you can go and see Antis where he's buried.
And what happened now? How did he come to get the medal? How did the medal get awarded to Antis?
Well, because his exploits in the RAF got so well known, everyone knew about the dog and what he used to fly. I believe he went on 21 bombing sorties, and most people never survived the first half a dozen without that. And Lord Waverley went there and presented it to the dog in person, which I have the photographs. You can see the photographs.
Which year was that?
I think that was in 1947 or 8, a couple of years after the war.
His certificate of gallantry, Wavell tells him, is the first ever awarded to a foreign dog. Interesting to the onlookers, but completely lost on Antis, who only understands Czech.
And then how long did Antis live?
Antis died. He died when he was 14. And to this day, he's still recognised as a wonderful, wonderful story. So, whoever's listening to this, if you want, like I want, to get a film made and you know anyone with the expertise and the knowledge, please get in touch, because that would be the icing on the cake, not only for making the film but to help wildlife out.